The US and Iran have wrapped up 14 hours of make-or-break peace talks to end the war. But there's no end to the fuel crisis. Beyond the immediate scramble for petrol and diesel supply, how will Australia respond longer term to this oil shock? The Transport Minister joins us shortly. I'm David Speers. Welcome to Insiders. It's been a long night in Islamabad, with delegations from both the US and Iran meeting to hammer out a peace deal. Both sides first met separately with the Pakistani mediators before coming face to face. After a marathon sitting, few details have emerged, with talks to resume later today. While those talks were underway, the US confirmed 2 of its Navy destroyers transited the Strait of Hormuz to clear sea mines. The opening of the strait, along with ending Iran's nuclear program, remain major sticking points. This war has caused both pain at the pump and a strain on US alliances, and neither can be quickly resolved. The Prime Minister is trying to shore up fuel supplies from the region, aware this crisis could have a long tail.
Every bridge in Iran will be decimated.
We would react in kind.
Every power plant in Iran will be out of business.
And express public incitement for war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Burning, exploding, and never to be used again.
Any attack on civilian infrastructure is a violation of international law.
A furious and frustrated US president lashing out online. Open the f***ing strait, you crazy bastards.
This is all embarrassing and juvenile.
I'm sick of it. Can't he just behave like a normal human? 3D chess, shut up.
The Epstein files comes out, we go to war with Iran. It's a good way to get people to stop talking about certain things.
Donald, my dear friend, once again, your decisive leadership brought another great victory to America.
You know who else didn't help us? Australia.
We continue to engage with the United States in a professional way, as allies would.
I can't understand why we haven't picked up the phone to the White House and said, what can we do to help?
The US president's war of words had taken a dark and disturbing turn.
A whole civilization will die tonight.
I don't think it's appropriate to use language such as that.
They're not the words I would use, you know that.
This kind of rhetoric has no place.
And in breaking news, just in, we've got to back down.
A 2-week double-sided ceasefire.
In response, Iran says it will allow safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
What matters here is we get the Strait of Hormuz opened up.
We certainly don't want to see the IRGC using the Strait of Hormuz as a toll booth to raise revenue.
This has to apply to Lebanon as well.
A ceasefire in name only, as Israeli bombs rain down on the Lebanese capital.
I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't.
Israel has the right to defend itself against threats that it faces.
But you want to be down in the gutter with Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu destroying...
No, I said I'd like to be on this. I'd like to be on the mountain singing Kumbaya.
Settle down, let me finish.
But that's naive, David.
The Prime Minister flying to Singapore today to shore up a crucial supplier.
Hello, my friend. How are you going? Good to see you.
This relationship is more important than ever.
Why do we have to go cap in hand to Singapore when we have a whole continent available to ourselves here that's got plenty of oil and gas available?
Prime Minister Wong and I have just signed the joint statement that will protect our mutual energy security.
Will Australia be prioritised?
We do not plan to restrict export. It won't happen.
This is a win-win.
We're joined this morning by Jacob Greber, the ABC 730's political editor, political journalist and columnist Karen Middleton, and Waleed Aly, broadcaster and columnist for The Age and Sydney Morning Herald. Very good morning to all of you. Let's just start on the developing news, Jacob. These talks between the US and Iran in Pakistan, marathon talks, 14 hours. They have, just in the last half hour or so, wrapped up and gone to bed for, I guess, a few hours sleep before they go back in tomorrow. Not much has leaked out of this, though. Is this a positive sign?
Look, 6 weeks ago, the Americans and the Israelis decapitated the Ayatollah. They took out the top of the regime. Here we are now with Vice President Vance
and the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament shaking hands in a room, it seems, for 8-9 hours at least. Very little information coming out about those discussions. With this type of statecraft diplomacy, that's probably a good sign on balance, because it suggests they're not game playing with each other yet. They're in the room,
running it through the media.
Right, that classic thing of negotiating publicly through the media. They're doing it in that room, so I think that's a good early start.
And as I mentioned, at the same time, the US has sailed 2 Navy destroyers through the Strait. Iran denied that, but US Central Command has made a statement that this happened. We know the Strait is one of the biggest sticking points here, Karen. The US wants it open, as does the rest of the world. Iran, however, want to hold that leverage that they've got here, don't they?
Yes, I think it was kind of slightly terrifying a couple of weeks ago when we heard initially from Secretary of State Marco Rubio and then from the President himself a few days later. This Marco Rubio, it was almost a casual comment to journalists in France after the G7 meeting. He said, oh, well, our objectives have all been achieved. We're going to get out of there. And by the way, Iran, it looks like they want to put a toll on, so you other countries are going to have to sort it out. And it's like, wait a minute. So clearing the Strait and having no toll is not one of the objectives, which suggested to the rest of the world that we're actually going to be in a worse position afterwards, potentially. Now, we've moved from there, and this is now one of the key negotiating points to get access to the Strait. I mean, the President even suggested in the interim that the US might put a toll on it. Well, that still wouldn't please the rest of the world. We've got to sort that out, because it has huge implications for access to fuel going forward.
I don't think motorists filling up the tank every week are going to be thrilled about the idea of paying a toll that goes to Iran. In terms of the US negotiating position, Donald Trump this morning was in Washington and made a comment that, look, doesn't really matter. We've won regardless. We've won this war regardless. But is it that straightforward, Waleed, when you look at the fact that, yeah, they've taken out a lot of the leadership, they've degraded Iran militarily, no doubt, but the regime's still there, the uranium's still there, and the Strait is this chokehold that Iran now, this leverage that Iran now has over the global economy?
Well, to be fair to the Trump administration, they backed away from the regime change thing really from the start. They weren't that interested in that. Israel's far more interested in that. So the fact that that won't be achieved doesn't mean they haven't met their war objectives. The problem is they've achieved the military objective of degrading Iran's military capacity. That capacity, by the way, was higher than they anticipated. That can be rebuilt. That includes the nuclear program, by the way, as long as you've got the know-how to rebuild. There's no way in which they can monitor what the nuclear program's state is going to be without inspectors there. Do you think Iran's going to allow inspectors back in, given how this is all played out? So we're probably going to have less visibility on that. So that's one side of it. But even if you think that the military stuff has been a huge success, it means nothing if it's not married to a political outcome. And the political outcome at the moment seems to be running all in Iran's favour. Sure, they're suffering pain from the economics of it. They are getting more money for their oil, by the way, because sanctions have been lifted on it, which is a bizarre element of it. So is Russia. But the bottom line is, before we went into this war, Iran didn't exercise control over the Strait of Hormuz. Now they do. They've discovered they can do it relatively cheaply. They've discovered that they can cripple the oil markets, not just through the Strait, but also through strikes on the Gulf nations.
And they've discovered this is the pressure point, which is a breaking point for the US.
I mean, there's a reason the bombing has stopped. It's because Iran has its foot on the throat of the global economy.
Exactly.
And they know that if they take that foot off, that opens them up to being bombed again. So it's quite a binary thing that's at the core of this negotiation. And as you said, Waleed, they're still letting oil go out. They're making money from oil. Shipments are getting to places like China. So the economic pain, it's tough for Iran, but it has been for quite some time.
And they're used to that. They've been preparing for this for decades. And especially since the 12-day war last year. The sign of this is the terms of the agreement, of the negotiation. America comes out with a 15-point plan. Iran responds with a 10-point plan. What's in it, as far as the public can see, is wild by American standards, but America says what we're getting privately is different. I don't know. But either way, the starting point for the negotiation is the Iranian plan, not the American.
But if you go back to first principles, if you win militarily, as the President Trump keeps saying, you lay down the terms of the political settlement. That is not what is happening here. This is a negotiation, and Iran is in a very strong position, and that is the problem for the US and the rest of the world.
Yeah, the other complication in this ceasefire and potential peace is Israel. and it does have different motivations here, as you mentioned, with regime change. There was a fascinating piece in the New York Times from Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman detailing what happened in the decision to go to war and how Netanyahu convinced Trump in the Situation Room to do this. Could Benjamin Netanyahu now be a complication in ending this war?
Yes, because Israel's not as concerned about the Strait of Hormuz as the rest of the world, and even America. America says it's not that concerned, and it's less concerned than, say, Asia, but it's still concerned. But also, their motivation in this war is centred around the notion of security. As long as Iran is militarily degraded, they will see that as a win.
And security for Israel.
For Israel, not for anyone, not for the region, right? So they're quite happy just to keep going. And I think the sign of that was what you saw in the aftermath of the ceasefire. Now, I know there's this disagreement about was Lebanon included and so on. I think it's significant that Pakistan, who were brokering this, thought that Lebanon was included, but let's leave that aside. The point is not that Israel continued in Lebanon, it's that it escalated. So its
biggest day of bombing, yes, straight after that ceasefire.
And it's hitting densely populated commercial and residential areas in Beirut, so not even the south. And it was 100 targets in 10 minutes.
It has scaled back since then, though.
Well, yeah, but there were 200 overnight, according to Israel. If that's low key, I think was the president's phrase, Donald Trump's phrase. I don't know what high key is, but so the point is that there is, and it has been from the start, a misalignment in the interests of Israel and the US, and now Donald Trump is going to have to wrangle Netanyahu. The question will be, what leverage does he have? So Donald Trump is now in a situation where his whole politics is about leverage, and he's discovered that Iran has a hell of a lot more leverage than he thought, and his leverage over Israel, I'm not sure
it's being put to the test.
It seems that it didn't even come up, this question of would the Iranians respond by bombing their allies and closing the strait. That's clear from that New York Times article. That doesn't seem to have been the case, and I think you had an interview this week.
Well, let me show it to you, because we'll go now to the Transport Minister, Catherine King, and to take us there, part of the podcast interview we did this week with Israel's Ambassador to Australia, Hillel Newman. He concedes the closure of the Strait of Hormuz was not something Israel was expecting when it decided to go to war.
We would assume that Iran would not affect the global community and the supply chains of energy for the entire world because of their predicament.
So you didn't assume
that is the problem of a rogue state.
You didn't think they'd do this?
We assumed and hoped that they wouldn't.
So you were surprised?
It was not part of our planning.
This was a surprise?
It was not part of our planning, yes.
Catherine King, welcome to the program. Let me just start on that. Do you think Israel should have expected that Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, it's not for me to speak for the state of Israel. I think we're dealing with the facts as they are, and the reality is we have a global fuel crisis because the Strait of Hormuz is closed, and as a country we are grappling with that. We hope very much that the talks in Islamabad over the weekend hold and that they are productive. It's a fragile ceasefire, as you can see from events in the Middle East just overnight. But really, I think the global community is hoping very much that this war ends and that the ceasefire holds, because the Strait has proven to be pretty critical to the global fuel supply, but also to global economies.
Well, this is the thing, and you're having to deal with it, motorists are having to deal with it. It's a question of whether the consequences of this war were properly considered. Do you worry they weren't?
Well, again, we're not a party to those. We're not party to the decision.
But you're having to deal with it.
Go to war. Yeah, and I think every single country is, and every single commuter is having to deal with it around the world. What we are saying really clearly is that we hope diplomacy works. It's a fragile ceasefire. It's our best chance. But even if that is the case, what we have to prepare for as a country here is that even if the Strait opens tomorrow, there's a long tail to this. We don't know what damage has been done to infrastructure. We don't know how quickly shipping can resume as normal or what the consequences of all of that are. So we have to plan really to make sure that we understand there's a long tail to this. We've been doing everything we can to shore up fuel supply, deal with issues of distribution, try and soften the blow of the fuel price hikes which are happening globally. And we're not party to the decisions that that were made, but we are having to deal with them.
Just on the negotiations that are going on this weekend, and we'll resume later today, as you say, you're not a party to them, but how do you think motorists would feel, and how would you feel if there's some sort of toll required for ships to pass through the Strait?
Oh, look, I think that, that obviously is, would be very challenging, and I don't think that's, in our contemplation. There's a free navigation of the seas. Everyone agrees with that, and that would really breach that, and we'd be very concerned about it. It's not something I think Australian commuters would be very happy with, not something the Australian government would be very happy with, and I don't think the global community would either. I think it's really important that, we do have free navigation of the seas. That's a principle of international maritime law, and really that should be upheld.
Let's turn to dealing with the consequences of all of this here in Australia. You're launching an ad campaign today. It's urging people to use less fuel however they can. Does this suggest that you are expecting this crisis to continue for quite some time?
Well, I think what we're saying is, as part of the National Security Plan, there are 4 levels, and we are at level 2 at the moment, where our fuel supply is holding. But as I've said, and the government has said previously, the longer this goes on, the tail of this is serious, and we have to prepare for that. The advertising campaign is really designed to do 3 things: make people aware of the National Fuel Security Plan, make people aware of the actions that the government has taken to date, but also that every little bit that you can do can also help. So making those decisions around whether, where there's public transport available, taking it where you can, make sure your tyre pressure is right, taking the load out of your car, that actually helps with fuel economy. And I think, it also helps, obviously, as people are working their way through dealing with the fuel price hikes as well. So really that's what it is, but also building that platform to communicate where there are changes, and if we do change levels, what that might look like for people as well.
The opposition's already labelled this political propaganda. Do we all really need to spend taxpayers' money to tell people to catch the train or check their tyre pressure?
I think that what the government is trying to do is provide as much information to people as possible. There's a lot of anxiety, understandably, and a lot of uncertainty in the community because of what has happened with this global conflict that we are dealing with. And I think people are wanting to have information, and of course they get that information from a range of sources, whether it's from the media, whether it's from social media. So the government's building a communications platform really to try and provide that information to people as quickly as we can, as we deal with what is, as I said, a global fuel crisis.
I guess the information a lot of households and businesses really need to know is, will prices remain elevated for quite some time? How long do you and does the government expect it will be before we see any return to pre-war prices?
Well, it is why, obviously, we cut the fuel excise, and for the transport industry, MySpace, we took the heavy vehicle road user charge to 0, and we've done that for 3 months. But I think everybody is experiencing, across the world, that because of constraint in supply, that means that fuel prices have gone up, and particularly, obviously, the diesel price is holding much higher than anyone would like it to be. So again, we think there is going to be a long tail to this. It's why the government obviously has cut the fuel excise, has tried to get more supply into the market, has tried to deal with the issues of distribution, and obviously as we head into the budget and we get more sort of indication of where this is going in the next months to come, whether there's a need for additional measures. We've obviously got the tax cuts coming in on the 1st of July, but whether there's need for additional measures for household and businesses, they're all the things that we're contemplating as part of the budget process.
So that's interesting. You are open to further cost of living help, and particularly help with transport costs. Might that 3-month reduction in the fuel excise have to be extended?
Well, again, they're all matters for budget determination, but as I said, there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty for people at the moment, and we're trying. The government is doing everything it can to shore up supply, deal with these issues of distribution, working with states and territories, looking at how we can sort of take some of the sting out of the price hikes that we're experiencing. But because this has a long tail, of course, we have to keep thinking about what are the next things we need to do as a nation to continue to prepare for what could, what could have a long tail. We're very hopeful, in terms terms of the ceasefire, but we're realistic about that as well. This is a complex geopolitical area that's not an easy area for quick and easy resolution. So we've got to be prepared for that and understanding what that means for businesses, for our farming communities, making sure we continue to transport goods and and provide services for people in communities far and wide.
I want to ask you more longer term what this oil shock means in terms of your thinking about how we do become more resilient to another shock like this in the future. You have no doubt seen the suggestions around drilling for oil, speeding up the transition to electric vehicles and trucks, holding bigger fuel storage than 30 odd days. What's your thinking? Does this change your approach on how we become more resilient?
I think what it does is really consolidate where we've been, where we're talking about. Whilst we talk about the need for electrification as part of the energy security, it's also part of our economic security. So, I do find it passing strange. Matt Canavan sort of going, trying to take us back to the 1990s or 1980s, not understanding that the world has moved on. The world's moved on in terms of energy security, and we've got this incredible resource here in this country that lots of other countries don't have. We're a secure, stable democracy, the capacity to generate renewables here in this country and then actually electrify. So whether it's in heavy vehicles, there's a great, terrific businesses. We just announced as part of the investor front door in the last couple of days that there's a great company, New Energy Transport out of Western Sydney, that's doing terrific work on heavy haulage electrification, really turbocharging some of that work. Of course, where there are hard to abate sectors like aviation and like some of the heavy haulage, which will take a little bit longer to electrify, low carbon liquid fuels. Actually, the fact that we basically grow canola here, then we ship it overseas, turn it into sustainable aviation fuel and then buy it back is nuts in our view. We should actually be having that low carbon liquid, renewable diesel. We should be able to generate that here. And I think what it's shown is we've really got to turbocharge those efforts. Yeah. So we've got a $1.1 billion fund for low carbon liquid fuels. So sustainable aviation fuel, biodiesel. Again, we made a couple of announcements about a company called Hammer, which is turning some of the waste product out of the forestry sector down in Portland into sustainable aviation fuel to head out to Adelaide Airport. It'll be based out at the port in Adelaide. So lots of projects. The Arena Grants program will be open shortly, but we're looking at whether there's projects that are ready and available now and ready to come on stream now. I know there's a lot of interest in the low carbon liquid fuels area, but also a lot of interest in transport, in electrification. So really trying to work to bring that forward. We announced again a couple of weeks ago some heavy vehicle charging stations, new charging depots, particularly on that East Coast distribution. But we've just got to really get forward with this, because if this has taught us anything, we cannot rely on the rest of the world for our energy security. We've got to be able to generate it here and actually then use it here as well. And electrification is a great way of doing that.
Well, let's talk more about electric vehicles. Clearly they're becoming more popular as people struggle with filling up the tank. The government already has some incentives in place for people to get an electric vehicle. The fringe benefits tax break for novated leases is the main one. It is far more beneficial to those on the top income tax bracket than those at the bottom. Economist Chris Richardson calls it a very good way to make cars cheaper for rich people. Is this really the best way to incentivise EV take-up?
Well, I think the biggest thing we've in fact actually done, which it was tried by the opposition at one point, but then also voted against by the opposition, is the fuel efficiency standard. The reason today
I'll come to that,
we've got more choice
just bring
and
you
more
back to the question.
vehicles.
Sorry, Minister.
Yeah.
The question's about the EV tax break, the fringe benefits tax break. Is this an efficient or fair way to incentivise EV take-up?
Well, I think it's worked. It has seen uptake of electric vehicles. We, of course, do want to try and make sure there is more availability of cheaper electric vehicles for people, and that's what the fuel efficiency standard has done. But also we do need to look at measures to how do we actually help low-income earners? How do we actually make sure that there's charging infrastructure in our poorer suburbs as well as and how do we deal with things like apartment blocks? There's good good technology now that allows that to happen. So
but sorry,
all of that
I'll
is
just
part
jump
of
in
our
there because
plan.
I appreciate all the other things, but I'm asking you about the fringe benefits tax break. It has been looked at in the lead up to this budget. It's costing more than 10 times what the government first thought it would. Is there any need to keep this going?
Well, we'll leave announcements around the fuel tax benefit for electric vehicles. I'll leave that to discussions in the budget. But certainly my view is it has worked to start the electrification of passenger vehicles. But the biggest thing we've done is actually provide more availability of electric vehicles. The fact that actually people have had that capacity to actually go and buy electric vehicles at the moment is because we did that.
So they're more competitive now. Do you still need an incentive?
Opposed.
Do you still need a tax incentive to buy one, or are they now competitive?
I think they're competitive, but I think equally, and I think they're definitely competitive at the moment with fuel. I don't think, as the Prime Minister has said, anyone's regretting having purchased an electric vehicle right at the moment. But equally, the issues around charging infrastructure and really rolling that out more quickly is important as well. I think
sounds like you're emphasising all the other things, not so much this tax break. It does sound to me like this one might go.
Well, I'll leave that for your speculation, but that's a matter for budget. But I think it has actually provided. The other thing it has done is the second-hand electric vehicle market. So obviously, when vehicles come off novated leases and then they're available for sale, you've seen a really big increase in people buying those second-hand electric vehicles right at the moment. So it actually has done a good job in terms of that availability. So I wouldn't write it off.
No, all right. Well, look, a final one. The electric vehicle drivers, of course, pay no fuel excise. This has been a problem for a while. As more people take up EVs, that's less and less that the government's getting through fuel excise. About 10 months ago, Treasurer Jim Chalmers said the idea of a road user charge, which would include EV drivers, was an idea whose time had come. So when will the government finally introduce a road user charge?
Yeah, so we've been working within my department on the model for what a road user charge might look like, and that's no surprise to anyone. I think that was in the mid-year economic financial outlook, so since December my department's been working on that. Obviously right at the moment we're trying to encourage as much electric vehicle uptake as we possibly can. We don't want to disincentivise that at all, so there's a balance to be struck here, both obviously with the fringe benefit tax, potential of road user charging, but we're making our way through that, and we'll have more to say about that.
When can we expect something to happen on this?
Well, again, we're working our way through that at the moment to see. I have there's two things here. The first is that we want to try and not disincentivise electric vehicle uptake, and particularly right at the moment when we're seeing such a surge in that. So it may not be the time for it right now. The second is it's obviously going to have to be legislated through the Parliament, and I'm not clear that there's a pathway for it through the Parliament at this stage. We'll wait and see.
So that's interesting. You don't think either the Coalition or the Greens would vote for this, so why bother? By the sounds of it, look, New South Wales and WA are saying if you don't, they will. July next year, they'll introduce their own road user charge. Will that create messiness, though? Do you need to move before then?
Well, I think that's that's a matter for states and territories. I think there's already been obviously a High Court challenge to the capacity for states to raise those sorts of charges, and so that will be a matter for those states. I think if there is such a scheme, it does need to be national. But as I said, we've got a balance to strike here. We want more electric vehicles. We don't want to disincentivise those, but we've also got to make sure whatever we do introduce doesn't disincentivise the uptake, but also so we've got a bit more work to do on it. Is basically what I'd say.
Transport Minister Catherine King, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Really good to be with you, David. Thank you.
All right, well, coming up, politics and the trial of Ben Roberts-Smith. Should Australia brace for a new front line in the culture wars? First, let's get back to our panel. We're joined once more by the ABC's Jacob Greber, political journalist Karen Middleton and Waleed Aly from The Age and Sydney Morning Herald. Jacob, I just want to pick up on electric vehicles. They are, unsurprisingly, more popular over the last month or so since we've seen this fuel crisis. Am I right to read into what the Minister just said there? Not a lot of strong defence of the tax break for electric vehicles, so that might be wound back, but the road user charge doesn't sound like it's coming any time soon.
I think at the very end there, she said, don't write it off yet. And I think that points to the fact that they're still juggling the nuance around it. Wouldn't be surprised off the back of that interview if in the budget they tinker with it a little bit. Maybe they lower the threshold for the type of vehicle you can buy. It's a cheaper vehicle, not a $70,000 or $80,000 vehicle where you get that tax break. So they might tweak it like that. I think there is now momentum for EVs. People can see clearly the benefits. So do they still need all these tax breaks to incentivise them? But the government's also got to be mindful that it wouldn't want to then stack an extra charge or extra weight onto people being able to buy these things. So tricky little juggling act. On the road user charge thing, let's see. I'm not sure how difficult that will be to get through Parliament. I mean, on the Conservative side of politics, they're quite worried about the fact that EVs get this, wouldn't call it a freebie, but they're not counted. They don't pay for the road.
Well, yes, but it would also, presumably by the opposition, be described as a new tax. Catherine King's not the only Cabinet Minister I've spoken to who says, look, this will not get through the Senate.
Yeah,
I don't see the point.
They are also raising the opposition, that is, the issue of equity between what people are paying for fuel, who drive fuel cars, and people driving EVs who are not subject to the same thing. And they are sounding to me like they would be open to something like this with various provisos. So it's interesting, I think, that Catherine King was saying, oh, no, the opposition wouldn't vote for it, and getting out ahead, and that sounding like a reason not to put it forward. I just wonder whether that's entirely right.
It also might depend a little bit on which view of the world within the coalition prevails.
Indeed.
Is it the Andrew Hastie vision of the world or the Angus Taylor vision of the world? Because I think they would actually have opposite instincts on something like this.
Well, and the Matt Canavan view seems to be more the Andrew Hastie view than the Angus Taylor view.
And he's admitted he quite likes EVs.
Yeah. He's got solar panels on his roof as well.
Plus, it would also depend how you did this, Jacob. There are different ways you could do it. The idea of how do you tax electric vehicle drivers, right? They don't pay fuel excise. Do you hit them with an annual tax levy fee or a per kilometre fee? The per kilometre fee can be complicated.
So very, very tricky. You're going to be giving the government or some agency data on every single kilometre that you've driven and where you've driven it.
How are the
to work out
Libertarians going to feel about that?
Right, so the Libertarians will lose their minds about it. They've, in some jurisdictions, such as on the west coast of the US, Oregon, for instance, gives you a choice. You can pay a one-off fee for the whole year, or use the telematics. And I'm told...
What are people doing?
I'm told 2/3 of people go for the telematics because you actually pay less. So they're happy with that information going to, big tax man.
It does depend where you live, though, doesn't it? Because if you're in the inner city,
you're going short distances.
Absolutely.
And then there's a state element as well, because you get a lot of data then about where people are driving, and that shifts the political balance between the federal government and the states. The federal government collects excise, but that's not hypothecated to roads. That goes into revenue. Government then hands out the largesse for infrastructure projects. This creates data. You can tell which roads are being used, where the demand is.
And if it's not a per kilometre charge, then it doesn't address the equity questions the opposition are raising, because people who are driving fuel cars are paying per kilometre because they're burning the fuel.
It's a fascinating policy debate, though, too, because technically you could look at which roads are being used and therefore deserve investment to make them bigger and better.
Be careful what you wish for, government. It might point out exactly where they are not doing what they should be doing.
Where they're pork barrelling and where they should be spending money, but that would require that data, all of us to give it over.
Yeah. But a lot of this is about incentives, right? Your questions were largely about policies that were designed...
to help people get it.
The incentive is there.
That's what I mean.
I mean, you don't need the incentive anymore. So then the question becomes, well, what's the real barrier? And the thing that I've not heard anyone from the government address yet is, it seems to me the real barrier is infrastructure, right? It's can I charge if I live in an
apartment? Or
if you live in a place where you don't have your own...
One of the things that advocates of this move to an EV charge are saying is, hook that concept of that revenue, hypothecated, whatever.
We'll spend it on charging stations.
To charging, and then you get buy-in from people.
If I want to drive more than 300 k's and I don't want to sit around for ages, or I'm looking for a charging station or waiting for it to charge, I'm not going to buy one.
But that's the thing that needs to be incentivised now, is the creation of the infrastructure. The case has been made. Like, there is EVs right now are as attractive as Jacob's wonderful shirt, for example. They are like...
Everybody wants one.
Yeah, everybody wants one. But can everyone have one, even if they did have the money to buy one?
Definitely not. What about these ads today? What do you think? Political propaganda, says the opposition. No, this is important information sharing.
I reckon
take your roof racks off.
I suspect there's a secondary motive here as well, and that is we're very much in an everyone for themselves environment, all the way up to the President of the United States. That's the kind of culture the US is perpetuating now. And this kind of campaign is not only giving you information, but it's also about what we can do together for the good of the country. And I just wonder whether there's a bit coming out from the government trying to pull people together in a very socially fractured environment. And it's interesting to me that they're running this kind of campaign. I think there's a bit of that too.
Feels very 1970s. This is the sort of stuff we talked about back in the first OPEC oil shocks. And, you know, for instance, if everyone drove 80 kilometres an hour up the Hume Highway instead of 100, you'd increase the fuel reserve
and
by
you'd increase
some amazing number of days instantaneously.
You'd increase the road rage too, probably.
Yeah,
So.
probably. But wasn't the roof rack thing interesting?
I didn't know 15% you save on the sea. We're learning.
I know.
From this ad campaign.
It might be propaganda, but it's useful propaganda.
Exactly. We'll get the screwdriver out when I get home. The PM visited Singapore on Friday. He was there meeting with his counterpart, talk about fuel supply. He's going to be, this week, we understand, meeting with others in the region as well. How important are these sorts of visits? The opposition was somewhat critical, but Jacob, is this important to remind Singapore and others of the two-way trade with our gas and their liquid fuel?
It's the body language of the way various leaders are moving around the region, I think tells you where the relative power structure in this economic issue lies. We've gone to Singapore. There's suggestions there'll be other trips to the region by the Prime Minister to other big suppliers. And there's a strong sense that the Japanese Prime Minister is coming here. I think that tells you roughly the lay of the land in terms of the economics. I'm a little bit sceptical about this idea that we've got leverage. Yes, we are a big supplier of LNG, but when we say we've got leverage, what do we mean? Are we saying we won't send that gas for some reason? It's not clear to me how that works.
We could tax it.
That's a good point.
Yes, but are we really saying that?
Are we threatening?
When Malaysia, Petronas is one of the biggest companies in Malaysia, is also one of the biggest investors in Gladstone exports. We don't send them gas. They don't need our gas, but I think we use something like 20% of our crude comes from Malaysia. So when we say that, what do we mean?
And just on the gas, it doesn't. The PM's language, Karen, he's been asked about this. Are you going to put on a new super profits or windfall profits tax on gas? And he's sort of indicated, look, my focus is supply, supply, supply.
Yeah, it sounds like he's saying now is not the time, doesn't he? And I guess, I mean, the sort of a related argument that's slightly different to the leverage thing is what this really does is highlights the importance of diplomatic relations, and not only leader to leader but country to country around the region, which take a long time to build up. And in a time like this, if you don't necessarily have leverage or want to make those threats, you really need to call in those relationships. And that's what's going on, particularly around our region. You're really seeing countries that have built up ties saying, hey, you know, we need this help from you, we'll give you this help.
Which, yeah, is about fuel, obviously, but it's fascinating in this moment, Waleed, that you've got the PM darting around the region. He spoke to China's Premier Li Qiang the other day as well on the phone. There's been no conversation with Donald Trump since, I think, the start of the war, and they talked about the Iranian soccer players.
It's a 2 a.m. call.
A 2 a.m. call.
Yeah, was that a conversation?
Well,
yeah, incoming one way, yeah.
I just wanted, interested in your thoughts on what we're seeing in terms of relationships. There is a concern in the Australian government that the US's global standing has been weakened by this war, that China's playing this quite smartly. What are you seeing?
Well, there's no doubt that our relationship with the United States has become so unpredictable now, because such that we can't really bank on it in a way that we've perhaps assumed for decades, right? And that fundamentally changes the thinking. So, I mean, the way to distill this is the US alliance is our most important security alliance, etc. If suddenly we were invaded by somebody, do you think Donald Trump would send troops? And the answer to that is nowhere near as clear in people's minds, I think, than it would have been under different US presidents. And then the question becomes, is this a moment where you just have a commander-in-chief that's unpredictable, or is this a movement, a change forever in the way that the US goes about doing its thing? So Australia then has to start pulling in these middle power relationships, sort of almost Carney style, not quite, but sort of. But we're also, I think the last time I was on this couch, I mentioned as a final observation that Keir Starmer had paid a visit to China, which hadn't happened for a long time, and talking about a relationship reset. This is now happening all over the world. So you're starting to see a devolution of power. Think of it as a diversification. You want to diversify your economy, you want to diversify your relationships now. And so maybe the language we were using before about leverage is not actually the right language here. It's actually mutual interest.
Yeah.
Because there are all sorts of other nations that are now worried about the sort of unipolar view of the world where the United States was kind of the linchpin in it all.
I mean, I can't think of a war that the Americans have got involved in where our Prime Minister ends up talking to China rather than the White House.
And what does the landscape look like after this? You know, are we seeing a reshaping forged by a crisis that has is longer lasting? Because I agree with Jacob. That's incredible.
But no one in politics will talk about this.
No.
Not to mention
Well,
an Australian
have we seen the Suez crisis?
Yeah.
Is this America's Suez crisis? I don't know.
Well, we don't know.
And it'll take
the
maybe a
moments
year
that
to
we're
determine
seeing,
that.
the moments we're seeing each week of this conflict, and an Australian Prime Minister rebuking a US President for the language they're using at wartime.
Eventually.
This wild comment about wiping out civilization. We haven't seen this before. Look, while a lot of this debate is inevitably now focused on repositioning, realigning, more self-resilience as well, the first job of a new political leader is making sure voters know where you stand. And Matt Canavan has wasted no time in laying out his vision for a more resilient Australia and, in short, a revolution.
I am proposing a revolution. Some of it will need the slaying of long overdue sacred cows, including our naive belief that open trade and open borders and open flows of people are always and everywhere going to be the best thing for our country. They can be a good thing, they can be, and they have been in some times in the past, but they're clearly not the right approach now.
Karen, what we heard from Matt Canavan at the Press Club was pretty consistent, I thought, with what we used to hear from Matt Canavan as a backbencher.
Yep.
He's not changed his spots at all, but the fact that he is now leader, and alongside Angus Taylor as leader, he's standing there talking about, deregulation, free markets, free trade, forget it. How does that fit with Angus Taylor's?
Well, indeed, he's leaning forward, right? And as we said earlier, it's far more the kind of thing that Andrew Hastie's been talking about than it is what Angus Taylor's been talking about. So, excuse me, there's a clear difference there. And we always see the coalition say, oh, well, the Nationals are talking to their constituency, the Liberals are talking to theirs. But there will be a reckoning on these because these are very firm policy ideas that he is putting that would make a huge change to the way the economy works. And the Liberals are going to have to decide, do they agree or not agree? Where are we landing on that? I don't know. But
where are we landing on that? I mean, they probably agree on the immigration stuff that we heard there. But
sure.
Jacob, is it clear where the Angus Taylor Liberal Party lands on some of these things?
I don't think these two things go together at all. Taylor, my sense is that Taylor would have been, there would have been a fair bit of, cornflakes coughed up that morning at some of these lines that were coming out. Getting rid of, saying we now support tariffs is essentially what Canavan's saying. He's saying he wants
to microwave Milton Friedman.
Yeah, we want to microwave Milton Friedman. Okay, fine, they're all good lines and they cut through, but that takes the Liberal Party and the coalition more generally into a sort of Labor light on all of these things. Labor is going down that road. They're already talking about heavy industry policy. They're bailing out aluminium smelters around the country. They're active in this space right
with
now.
With a green tinge compared to the Matt.
That's the difference, but that's not the Liberal Party. That's not the dry economic Liberal Party view of how you generate wealth in the country. It's the opposite. So how those two things go together is going to be fascinating.
But you know what is interesting? It does seem to be the view around which all sorts of previously at odds constituencies are now gathering, right? I mean, I think if you asked a whole bunch of people who fled to One Nation whether they liked this idea of increased sovereign capacity and reliance on tariffs.
What a coincidence.
They jump on it. No, sure. But I think if you asked people on the other side of the political spectrum, some people who vote, you mentioned Labor's moved in that direction too, maybe even some Greens voters. There's actually this weird consensus, this is too strong a word, but you see what I mean, there's convergence perhaps that's happening. The party that's out in the cold there are the economic dries.
And it depends on the issue, doesn't it? I mean, the coalition can go and try and be more Hanson on immigration. But if you care about if you're a person who's really, really worried about the numbers of people coming to this country, you're going to vote for One Nation. They're the OGs on this, aren't they?
And
whereas on the left, if you're worried about, I want the government to be involved in heavy industry, well, Labor's doing that. Wouldn't you go there rather than a sort of rebranded version from the coalition.
Well, and Matt Canavan's trying to sort of thread a needle here because he's speaking out against Pauline Hanson's ideas, some of her ideas, particularly about Muslims and the like. And there's, you know, some support for migrant work in rural areas, that sort of thing. So they don't necessarily want a wholesale anti-migrant debate, but they do have, as Waleed says, crossover on some of these other economic issues. And they're all trying to appeal, all the other parties are trying to appeal to the people that One Nation is drawing away.
Well, this week, one of Australia's most decorated soldiers, Ben Roberts-Smith, was arrested and charged with war crime murder. He denies the allegations, but before the trials even started, it has opened up a bitter political divide.
Once celebrated as a National War Hero Victoria Cross recipient,
Ben Roberts-Smith is behind bars.
I have no intention of commenting on a matter that's clearly before the courts.
This is a legal process and it needs to take its course.
He's facing 5 counts of war crime murder and life in jail.
I will keep standing by Ben Roberts-Smith.
We put him up on a pedestal of valour, and now we are putting him in the stocks of dishonour.
I know that there are people who have been waiting for accountability for a very long time, and this is hopefully the beginning of that moment of accountability.
I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we see sort of community rallies based around this cause.
Andrew Hastie says it is possible that I will be called as a witness to this trial.
It was a very public arrest and it was done in front of his kids. There are questions here for the government. What did they know about this?
It is a difficult time, and for people in the Defence Force, but it's important that this not be politicised.
Now, we don't want to get into anything that might prejudice the case, but just on the sort of debate that we saw immediately spring from this, Karen, Waleed, you both wrote about it. Why, Waleed, did this become such a lightning rod so quickly?
Well, it's been a lightning rod for years, ever since the Age and Sydney Morning Herald published their investigation, and it immediately became a culture war. What I think was interesting about this is that if you look at the voices that are more, let's say, combative on this, they tend to be ex-politicians or One Nation. You didn't hear Angus Taylor. I mean, I didn't like the way the arrest happened. There's been some stuff about how much did this cost, but they largely stood away. And I think there is something virtuous in the fact, whatever your attitude to this all might be, there's something virtuous in the fact that this now has to retire to a judicial forum, in a criminal forum with a high standard of proof under Australian law, introduced by the Howard government, by the way, with an investigative office that was established by the Morrison government. There's something about this that means that there's a gravitational pull towards backing away from the culture war a bit. So it's still happening, but it's not happening at the centre of our politics in the way that I think it might otherwise have happened. Yeah.
Couple of things I think are interesting. Pauline Hanson was the first political leader out speaking out about it, excuse me, just within minutes literally of the police press conference finishing, and she was very pro Ben Roberts-Smith and very critical. Now, she is now receiving, her party's receiving at least in-kind support from Gina Rinehart. Gina Rinehart is a big supporter of Ben Roberts-Smith. So there's that in the background, but also I think, you know, it connects a bit for some people in the community with this anti-authority thing that's going on that One Nation is also trying to plug into. You know, there are some in the defence community who are outraged. There are other people who think, you know, that justice should be done and, you know, it's the law taking its course.
And the whistle was blown by soldiers.
And soldiers were the ones who gave testimony about what they saw. So the fog of war argument is, you know, it doesn't seem to apply here.
And the argument that how can we possibly understand what goes on? As you say, they're the ones who are blowing the whistle.
But I think, and what I wrote in the monthly was that I think, you know, what we're seeing is yet another collision of the justice system with the political system here, because people are seeing it being in their, some people are seeing it being in their political interests to make a particular point about it in public. And I think...
But that's why it has to be, you know, it has to go through that course.
Absolutely.
I think it's a test of the institutional fortitude and values that we uphold here. Go and look elsewhere around the world where this is breaking down. A president can be impeached and there's zero consequence. You know, people get pardoned in the United States willy-nilly, and that undermines the court system. And then you have a culture that doesn't trust the court system and thinks there is a political motivation. And I think this is this is an important moment for people to step back and let that go through the process that you've described.
The problem is that it goes to the heart of one of the sacred cows in Australian popular discourse, which is about the Anzac legend, which is about the unimpeachable
Deeply
virtue.
uncomfortable.
It is very uncomfortable for a lot of people. There's a whole other side of politics that absolutely loves taking that narrative on, and that's partly why you're seeing a culture war, because the narratives this attaches to are so febrile in a way. Now, the thing is, the only way we get through this, if we actually want to get through this, rather than use it as a political cudgel, is for everyone to step back and not try to expand the narrative beyond the case. Yeah. Let the case take its...
There is one element, though, that is being debated and certainly contested by the opposition. They're saying the government should provide some answers. And, Karen, that's over the nature of the arrest. Yep. We saw it there at Sydney Airport. His kids were on the plane and so on. And, is there a fair point of criticism here about the way that was conducted?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think you can boil it down to some common sense things. People are arrested in public places sometimes.
Doors are kicked in with kids at home.
Well, and I guess you could argue this wasn't that. If anything, it was kind of a secure environment with minimal witnesses that the police could kind of go in and get him. Now, his kids obviously were there as well. The camera that was there, I think people have misunderstood that they think the camera was a TV camera. It was a police camera. And
which, just explain that, that's not unusual.
They do that, my understanding is they do that all the time, that they're videoing all the time their sort of arrests and warrant issuing and all that sort of stuff. And often, you know, when you see a press release from the police, there's a link at the bottom to Vision for the media. And that, I think, is trying to stop cameras converging on crime scenes or on arrests or whatever and causing chaos.
And I think there's an interest in it being a kind of the original source of information rather than, I mean, in this era where you can manipulate images, I think that kind of operational habit or standard is pretty important. So I think that's...
I don't love it though.
It's
the
not
police
great.
are an interested party as well. The idea of turning these things into images, I mean, that's not spectacle, but it's a form of spectacle.
The difficulty is if you've done it on a whole lot of other cases and you don't do it on this one, and you get the reverse. What are you hiding? Why is it done in secret? It's wickedly difficult, I reckon. And you know, presumably the police are very focused on operational considerations. They don't exercise that kind of, you know, they don't arrest somebody unless they're absolutely sure they've got enough evidence to justify the arrest. And
they've been asked to do so
and,
by
you know, my understanding also, there's this thing about sensitive investigations now, which I think came after, remember the arrest, the raid on Annika Smethurst's place and then the ABC raid. Remember, I think it was Christian Porter, the Attorney General, then introduced a range of provisions about the government being notified. There's a board that is, I think, made up of police that exists, so that to kind of review the operational information and determine whether it meets that threshold because of the potential implications. And I read the guidelines for that, and a prominent person in the community being arrested is one of the people that might trigger that. I think that means that it then had to go to the Attorney General to be authorised. Just the arrest had to go to the Attorney General. It's not the same as a warrant process, but there was connection with the government at that point. Yeah.
All right. Well, there's lots to go. The bail hearings, I think, begin this week, so lots to come in all of this. All right. Our panel: Waleed Aly, Karen Middleton, and Jacob Greber, back shortly with some final observations. Time now, though, for Mike Bowers and Talking Pictures.
I'm Mike Bowers and I'm photographer at large for the New Daily. I'm talking pictures this morning with cartoonist for The Guardian, the one and only Fiona Katauskas. A very warm welcome, Fiona.
Well, thank you, Mike, and it's good to be here after 10 days up in the Artemis spacecraft. I'm having trouble adjusting to the Earth's pull and to the gravity of the current situation we're all in.
Certainly the whole world seems to have been sitting on the edge of its seat. And Harry Bruce has got one eye on history, I think. Great quotes of American presidents. We've got Abe Lincoln 77 years ago.
And Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly and carry a big stick.
Then the other Roosevelt, Franklin D. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
John F. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
And Ronald Reagan's famous, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
And then we got Donald Trump here. Open it, beep, straight, you crazy bastards.
Can't really see that on the side of a monument in Washington, DC.
No, but this whole situation must provide comfort for parents of narcissistic, horrible, obnoxious children, that their child could grow up to be president one day.
Do you think it's a plus or a minus when you're being a negotiator in peace talks that you can sort of fall back on the fact that your boss is a complete lunatic?
Oh, Mike, I think the madman theory only works when you're not actually a madman.
Mark Knight has picked up on this. Open the beep straight, you crazy beep. Your whole civilization will die tonight.
It's a clever negotiating tactic. Out crazy your crazy opponent.
Yeah.
Well, look, to be fair, I think that outfit quite suits him. I think he should wear that more often.
It does. David Rowe of crossing the Delaware with Washington backwards to victory as he's got the General's taco hat on.
It's not the devil's in the details, the glory is in the details with David Rowe. It's flapping his little Sharpie pen. He's a taco shell of his former self.
And Pete Hegseth here is the ornamental bow.
It is a magnificent cartoon, but it is totally putting me off Mexican food.
Lovely, Brom. And Iran seems to have come out of this of being able to install a toll gate on the Straits of Hormuz.
Oh, I know. The $2 million to sail through the Strait of Hormuz. Where'd you get that idea?
Yeah, think of it as a tariff. Megan Herbert has beautifully picked up on the world being held to ransom with adrenaline and cortisol as the heartbeat of Donald Trump's signature there.
I know, and I love this. You can almost feel it, can't you? It's like, you're not sitting calmly.
Life support.
Yeah, well, I think REM has left me very ill-prepared for the end of the world as I know it, Mike, because I don't feel fine. I don't feel fine at all. And there's so much going on at the moment that I thought, you know what, I just want to do a dumb gag.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Albanese with his mate Jerry here on a can-do mission, where you've got Jodie off in the other room saying, finish packing for Singapore.
He's pulling out the nation-sized jerry can.
Yes, didn't get anything funny.
While things on Earth were pretty tense, Fiona, the Artemis 2 mission showed us that things can be out of this world.
A little bit of brightness in
there. Really was, wasn't there?
Yeah.
I love this Bad Yu Chow cartoon. Let's just stay on the moon. The astronauts here are sort of watching as Meteor Trump.
This cartoon is a bit of an inversion of the classic alien trope. You know, instead of take me to your leader, they're saying take me from our leader.
Fiona, it's been a great pleasure unpicking the otherworldly events this week, and let's boldly go.
Well, thanks, Mike, and over to Mission Control. It's back to you, Spearsy.
Time for breakfast.
Out of this world, Fiona. Mike, thank you very much for that. Let's get some final observations, Waleed.
One of the pressure points on Donald Trump in this negotiation of Iran are the midterms, which are coming up. We're looking for signs. Marjorie Taylor Greene, former Trump loyalist, famously not now, she's left. And so in the 14th Congressional District in Georgia, there's been a runoff election. The Trump-aligned Republican candidate, Clay Fuller, won because the Republicans are always going to win their seat. But the margin was 12 points. Marjorie Taylor Greene's margin was 29.
Wow. Interesting.
We'll see what that means, but that's a big drop.
It certainly is. Karen?
Looking ahead to the budget, if anyone still doubts that the government's going to make changes to the capital gains tax concessions and negative gearing, look at the language in the Prime Minister's press club speech recently. He talked about the status quo, not cutting it anymore, and needing bold change. Now, they've been getting research for a long time from voters saying they want something to change, and this is where the whole overthrow the system thing comes from. We know other leaders are getting the same. Matt Canavan, Economic Revolution. Angus Taylor's language in his address to the nation after the Prime Minister had a tone of that as well. But the risk for the government here is when you raise expectations of bold change, is it the kind of change people are looking for, and is it enough? That's the challenge they've got in this really tough economic environment with that budget.
It's going to be a fascinating budget.
Yeah.
Jacob?
Yeah, just bouncing off that, I think that's right. The key caveat that he adds is radical change or big reform is all good, but it has to work for people.
And they've all got different ideas about what it looks like.
That's the big caveat sitting there. And the thing I'm thinking about is what are the areas where they're dropping because they're so focused on the here and now of this crisis. One of his big ambitions, he made it very clear from the outset, is to have universal childcare. How is that going? Where's that at? Is there room in the budget? They need to tighten spending, if anything, rather than increase spending. They've got problems with the NDIS. What is happening to some of those other priorities? Big open question. And I think we're also waiting on something from the defence space this week as well, a sort of longer term plan.
Yes, new Defence Strategic Review. Plenty to come this week. Thank you all very much for a fascinating conversation this morning. Finally, from Tony Abbott's onion outrage to Bill Shorten's hot dog disaster, most pollies have learned it's best not to eat on camera. Some, however, have no fear. We'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching.
I say you should never eat on camera. Bit of my own margarita.
Good, smell the freshness, the tomato, the cheese. Now listen for the crunch. There you go.
It's good. It's not as good as that one.
You're making us all feel very excited about being here.